Hey and welcome. I had a request come through to look at building a custom chart in ServiceNow. I'm going to go through an example that shows how to use ChartJS, pull some information from the instance, and then generate a custom chart here on a UI page. This is the result, just showing the number of incidents open per day. Each of these columns is that count. So we'll look at that example, and then we'll try to do one live that's a little more complicated. So we hop over to the code here. This is a UI page. The only thing really special about this UI page is I did mark it as direct. So that just means that the page itself won't load with any of the additional ServiceNow libraries. There's some pretty annoying conflicts that come in with the materialize and jQuery. So just to avoid that today, just mark that direct to simplify this page a little bit. Starting at the very top here, we do have some links. We're bringing in some style sheets. One is for Font Awesome. I don't actually use that, but it's just in my core template, so I left it there. One is Materialize, which I am using, but it's more or less just to center things on the page, and then the icons that come along with that. So the first thing that you're going to want to do within your UI page is do an evaluate block so that we can get back some data from the instance. In this case, I'm just going to use the incident table as my source. The first thing I want to do is create an object or a container just to hold all of the values that I want to bring back. Next, I'm going to initiate my glide record query. It's just going to go to incident. I am going to order by priority, although it doesn't really make a difference in this case. And then I'll do my query. As I iterate over the results, I'm going to push back onto that data object any of the values that I want to use. So it's a good idea before you come in to start making a chart that you have an idea of the different dimensions that you're going to want to use. It's not just a list, so you probably want at least 2 dimensions. And in this case here, I am going to use the syscreated on date. So I definitely want to bring the date into that chart. And then priority will be the second dimension that I want to use. And in this case, I'm just gonna do a count of those records grouped by the create date. So that's what I'm doing here. Just gonna push those objects or those values onto this raw data object here. I'm gonna use this get display value, but if you do directly use any of the values, don't forget to do a toString. Last, before I close out this geevaluate block, I am going to stringify the data so that I can more easily bring that back to the client here. When I do this, I'll just be able to drop that entire string, that entire serialized string, right into the output on the page, and I'll put that right into the script tag. Underneath that is going to be the HTML that is the actual page itself. Just using some of the materialized classes to create a container to center it, and then a couple of rows, one for my header, which just says header, and it is a header. The second row here contains a canvas that ChartJS will use, and that needs an ID and a height and a width, although these don't really seem to affect it too much. It seems to resize anyways, so these are just the initial dimensions for that canvas. Beneath that, I do need to start bringing in some of the scripts here, so I will bring in jQuery and materialize as just some housekeeping. I'll bring in obviously the ChartJS library minified. I'll bring in moment, although I don't use it in this example, and then I'll bring in Lodash, which I do use in this example, and this is a library that makes it easy to work with arrays and collections. All of these are being loaded from CDN Cloudflare, just to make it a little bit easier. You can, if this presents issues within your instance, bring all of these files in as UI scripts, but for prototyping and just trying things out, this is sufficient. So lastly, on this page here, I do have the script which will actually control the creation of the chart here. I'll start by closing everything in a closure here and making sure that jQuery does get assigned to that $sign. I'm not actually using that here, so it was just part of my core template that I left in there. The first thing I do is create a reference to the context object, and here would have been a good place to use jQuery, but I'm just going to use plain old vanilla JS here. I'm going to go ahead and get a reference to that sample chart canvas, and then I'm going to get the context, the 2D context for the actual chart. Here I've got a bit of jelly here. This is that data string that I serialized or stringified earlier. I'm just going to drop that entire literal string into the script here. So the result of this is the output that gets generated from jelly will just be JavaScript, and this will be that stringified array of objects. So in this first example, we just wanted to list out the counts by day. So the first thing I want to do is take this raw data, which is not it's not usable in ChartJS. It needs to be formatted first. I'm going to take that raw data and I'm going to first start by grouping it on the date. So I'll do low dash group by data, and then I'm going to pass it this function here that tells it the value that I want to group on. In this case here, I'm looking at the record and I'm returning the syscreated on date. I don't want the full date time, so I'm just going to split it. I'm going to split it on the space and return the first half of that, which should be the date if we're dealing with an ISO format here. After that, once I've got the data actually grouped here, I can go ahead and I need two pieces of information to generate this chart. One, the labels. In this case, the labels in this chart will just be the dates. So in order to get an array here, I'm just going to use, again, low dash. I'm going to do a map function on that group data, and then just iterate and return the key, which in this case will be the date. So I'll get an array of all the dates here. The second thing that I need is the data, and in this case I'm going to again iterate over that grouped data, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at each of those objects in that array, and I'm going to get a count of the records that are underneath that. So if you're visualizing the group data array here, it will be an array of objects, the key of which is the syscreated on date, and then underneath that it will return an array of all the original objects here. So I can just do that length, a quick and dirty way to get the count. I'm not dealing with any stacks or anything yet here. So just want the total count, so I can do object.length there to get that. Finally here, I am going to use this, I'm going to create the chart by doing just new chart. First parameter is the context or the object where I want that chart to generate, which is that canvas. And then it's going to be the options for that chart here. So my type is just going to be a bar chart. The data here comes in a couple of pieces. The first is that labels. Looks like I just reiterated myself here, ran that function again. Should have just been labels there, but same difference. The next one are the data sets. In this case, I've only got a single data set, and in that data set here, I will pass that data object or that data array, which should just be the list of counts, and then the label that this data set has, and just put here, for example, incidents open. And again, just the result will be this here. There's my labels here at the bottom, and then each of these are those counts of those different objects here. So this is a very, very simple example here. A lot of charts or a lot of reports will need something like this, but we can go a little bit further. We can make this a little bit more complex and bring that second dimension, those priorities, into play here. So I've got my group data. I'm going to leave that the way it is still, and then I'm going to do something else here. Since I want to also stack by the in this case we're using priorities. The next thing I'm going to do is grab this second dimension, and I want to get a list of all the different priorities that were returned within this group data. So what I'll do, here is I'm gonna map the original data. So I'm gonna just iterate over all the objects in the array array. I'm gonna return the priority, and this function here is gonna give me a big list, and it's gonna have duplicates of all the different priorities: 1 critical, 2 high, and so forth. I'm going to take that and I'm going to feed that into this unique function, which will just give me that sorted list of the priorities. So I'll get one each of all the different priorities that are returned in this report. You could hard code this. You could, if you know that you just want 1 through 5, and you know what those values are, you can absolutely hard code it. But this gives us a little bit more flexibility. If there's no, if we just happen not to get any high values back in the list, there's no reason to create an object for it. It will just be empty. So this will give us a little bit of flexibility and make this a little bit more reusable. So the result here will just be an array of all the different priorities in that data set. I've leave these in here for now. Bring in some additional code here. So I'm gonna instead of just having one data set, which is the count here, I need to get a little bit more complex. I need to create several data sets, one of each for those different priorities. So I'll start by doing a map on those second dimensions there. I want to iterate over each of those values that I got back, and from that within there, I'm going to iterate over that group data. I am going to filter each of the results to only bring back the objects that match, whose priority matches the dimension that I'm in. So in the first iteration, this value is going to be 1 critical. I'm going to bring back a list within that particular group of all the critical elements there. But I don't need the actual data. All I need is the count here. So I'm just going to shorten this and bring back the length. So the end result here is that this counts should equal the count, or the actual count of that priority for that particular group. And again, the group data is initially grouped by the first dimension, which is the date this is created on. So I've got this count here. That object, or that I can't just return that won't be usable within ChartJS if I got to return a dataset object. It's expecting a few things. One is the data here, so this count will be an array of the different counts of that priority by day. The second thing that I need to give it, I don't need to give it, but it helps to display it a little bit better, is a color, so that this particular stack you can visually distinguish it from the other stacks here. And I've just pulled in from Stack Overflow a function to generate a random color here. I should give it a label as well. The label will just be the dimension, which happens to be the display value of that priority, so it fits nicely. And fill false here. This actually wasn't necessary. This is only usable in a line chart, but I'll leave it here just because it's in the example. So the only thing left here that we need to change is the call to the chart function, which generates the chart. The labels will stay the same. The data sets will be different here. Instead of creating a single data set here, I've already created it with my function up above. And the last thing that I want to create here is this will generate. If I leave it like this, it will generate a bar chart, which with each priority being its own bar, so it looks a little cluttered. So just to make this a little bit nicer looking, I'm going to add this here, which will stack the results. It'll give me a nice bar chart with all of those stacked. So I'm going to save this here. Takes a second. Go back over to ServiceNow. If I've done everything correctly here, this should give me stacked results. It's not. It's still giving me the options or the different priorities here one by one. So there's some defect in the code here, but this is at least telling me, or at least showing me, that I've got the data correct here. So let me hop back over to my code here for just 1 second. See if I can't spot that error. So I found that error. It would happen to be a copy and paste error. Data type and options should all be on the same level. Previously I'd had the options right at the same level as data, or underneath this data object here. So with that error fixed here, the result should be something like this. You can see now I've got all of the days. My first dimension here at the bottom. I've got the total count here is the entire bar, and then within each of that bar, the individual stacks or the counts for those different priorities there. So that's just a very simple example using ChartJS. These charts can get very complex here. Like I said, the actual drawing of the chart is I feel the easy part. The hard part is getting this data into the correct format so that you can use it. Takes a lot of skill and a lot of patience. This Lodash library does make things a lot easier. So instead of creating tons of for loops, which can decrease the readability a little bit, I tend to use this in place here. The website for this is I believe it's just lodash.com or lodash.org. They've got great documentation and tons of examples on their site as well. So if you're going to be attempting to make charts, I highly recommend you become proficient with this library as well. So that's it for today. If you have any questions, be sure to reach out, and I'll try to reply to them. Thanks.